Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something along the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. If you're enjoying the conversations here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow if you're watching or listening. Also, if you or somebody you know would like to come on and have a chat with me, feel free to reach out to me on your social media platform because I'm probably on it. And the best way to find that, if you go to isaac.r11.com, there'll be a link to all the different places you can find me. All right, so with that out of the way, I'm looking forward to this. We were chatting about like random stuff before we got started. This is somebody that I've worked with in the past, but we never actually had a real conversation, and I'm looking forward to having that real conversation. So my guest today is Dan Wahlin. Dan, do you want to say hello? Introduce yourself.
Hey, well, it's great to be on the show here with you, Isaac. And yeah, we had a great chat. We were geeking out about audio stuff and exercise stuff, and but I guess we're gonna do tech now. So
Yeah, I mean, we'll do a little bit of tech, we'll do a little bit of this. Maybe there'll be some ranting. We'll see how it goes. I like to start these shows with figuring out like how you got started. Like, do you remember when technology first introduced itself to you? Were you a bit younger? Was it a little bit later in your life? Like, when did you realize like tech is the thing for me?
I guess how far do we want to go back? I
I
can go
mean,
back
people
pretty
have
far here.
like,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, like I think I had somebody on
this
my show that was like, I got a computer when I was 4. So like,
yeah, well, I don't go back that far,
yeah,
but I
sure,
I think I don't remember my exact age to be honest. Whenever Apple IIc's first
okay.
came out. And it was probably a few years after that, I suspect, but I'm guessing I was 10 or 12 or in that range, which really dates me, Isaac. So my grandpa for Christmas got us an Apple IIc, and mainly I used it for what you would use when you're 12 or whatever I was. I had some games and
Yep.
a lot of those. What was that game called? Like Zed or trying to remember. Is it a text-based game? I can't remember the name of it though. Everybody now listening's going, it's. But anyway, so got into that, but then I also discovered you could script some things,
Sure.
and I never did. I was pretty young, never did anything fancy, but I started playing around with that, and then that kind of phase just ended. Um, so fast forward to high school, I did take a class in like basic, and we had those TRS 80s.
Okay.
So again, I'm really dating myself here. We used to call them trash 80s. They were pretty cool though. I learned a lot on those things, and I loved the class, but that was the extent of it.
Yeah.
So my plan in college and stuff, I did, chemistry, biochem type topics actually, because I was going to go to med school.
Okay.
And in between taking my MCAT, I had some kind of a gap for job and stuff, and I decided to apply for this. It was kind of like webmaster job we used to call it back
Sure.
in the day.
Sure.
And I had some experience at that point. I had really been playing around with HTML, and I don't even know that CSS was there, but it was still early days. I got started back with Mosaic, by the way.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
go way
Okay.
back on the
Yeah.
browser.
Yeah.
Then Netscape came out, and finally JavaScript came out, and all that stuff. So long story short, I ended up getting this job, and I loved it. And I still kept going on the med type path.
Sure. Sure.
Then I had another opportunity, technology wise, that was even better. And I'm like, I told my wife, I'm like, I don't know, I really like this. Like,
Yeah.
maybe I should just do this. And that's long story short, that's what I ended up doing. The funny thing is, my son is now a doctor. So I guess, he replaced what I didn't do.
Sure.
But
Sure.
yeah, that's how I got started. So I did not have an official, I didn't do computer engineering
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
college or anything like that. I was pretty much self-taught, to be honest.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that I find interesting about, especially with people that, they came from a maybe a little bit different background and they kind of fell into computers like by happenstance, is that and correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that part of the reason why you're interested in like the medical field is like the problem solving aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
Like somebody's
The
gonna come
science
to yeah,
aspect.
somebody's gonna come to me with they have an illness or whatever it is, and try to figure out what the issue is. And I think that directly correlates into the problems we're trying to solve in technology. Like, do you recall like some situation where you kind of were thinking about things from a technical perspective, like you're trying to build an app or whatever, like it's write some little algorithm, and you were like, "Oh, this is kind of similar to like the way that I go about doing things when I was going through the process of studying medicine?
Yeah, because it is like that. Like I'll give you an example. I wish I would have had the knowledge I have on problem solving, like you said today, back when I first
Sure.
took like inorganic chemistry for whatever reason should have been the easiest class ever for me
I
in
don't know. I
school.
fell out, I
And
fell out of organic chemistry. I'm a lot like
well,
I did
organic I loved,
yeah, okay.
but inorganic, which should have been easier because it's mainly just solving equations and things like
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
But back then, I don't know. I just approached things differently, I guess.
Yeah.
And I look back and I kind of laugh at that because if you know the general equations, all you got to do is substitute in the different, variables, if you will, and you're good to go. But I mean, I did get an A in that class, but it was a hard A
Sure.
because it was
Sure.
a hard class. But I think you're right because, like, when I got to organic, which is you have those little tinker toys, um, and the tests literally have these tinker toys, and you have to figure out how to put the molecules together to solve that, whatever the problem. And I
Yeah.
love doing that stuff. Like that was one of my favorite classes. So I think you're right. It's a lot with problem solving and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, this is top of mind to me, like the whole because at least for me, and I don't know if you were similar to this, I felt like I knew exactly the point in time where I was not going to learn past the particular point. Like I remember taking a math class in college. It was a limits and infinite series. I don't know if you took that in college. It's kind of like a math heavy thing, and like it's so theoretical that my brain just was like, nope, this isn't for you. We're gonna not gonna do this. Um, and I wonder, like, when you were going through, like, did you have a similar experience, like, where, you could even correlate now into tech, where it's like you realize, like, you know what, this isn't something that I'm ever really gonna feel good about doing. So I'm gonna focus learning other things that might be a bit more interesting for me. Like, I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, from how you learn perspective, do you have a really good, like, do you have the ability to kind of understand, like, what your limits are from, like, a learning perspective?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, over my career, just talk about real quick I'll circle back to what you asked. Learning in general, like if anyone that I know that's been successful over their career had a superpower, it was the ability to learn quickly,
Yeah.
but also know, like you now circling back to what you just asked, kind of the constraints of what you're good at learning and what maybe you're not so good at learning, or how you could improve that area. Because let's face it, especially these days, like if you can't learn quickly, it's pretty tough in our world, especially with all this AI stuff going on.
Yeah, yeah. I think we're gonna
Um,
talk about the AI stuff in a bit. Yeah, finish what you're saying.
but yeah, I think because I think we're a lot alike. It sounds like I really struggle with the what I'll call fluffy topics where there's
Sure.
not necessarily one right answer and it could be this, or this. I definitely gravitate more towards what can we do that's more concrete,
Yeah, yeah.
that we can actually get a solution that multiple people would agree with. Because as soon as it gets all fluffy, I'm kind of like, and I'll have to admit, in my career nowadays, I deal with a lot of there's not one right answer
Yeah,
type
yeah.
things,
But it
and it's
depends.
challenging.
Lots of it
Yeah,
depends.
yeah, it
Yeah,
depends. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, in thinking about your background too, like, I mean, and I always think about this because I have a talk that's like kind of like the history of the web, and I love to kind of drill into like the inflection points of building things on the web and like when things became harder and easier and where we are at today. And I always think about like you're talking about things like Netscape and then Web 2.0 and then the advent of social media platforms and all these things, right? Like, and do you have a particular memory of to like, "Oh, like, this web thing is gonna be around forever." Like, did you have, like, an epiphany moment like that, or you just kinda followed along with all the trends?
No, I think I did. So one of my first jobs, we had to build an open enrollment system for benefits. And I decided, and looking back, now keep in mind, I'm in my 20s
Sure,
and,
sure, sure,
I'm
sure.
just super motivated and all that stuff.
Building things that
I
already exist,
decided
yeah.
to, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So the concept of Ajax or, HTTP requests
Yeah,
behind the scenes in the browser, that wasn't even supported yet. But back then, the security on iframes was different. And you could actually have an iframe call out to the server, and you didn't even have what we call APIs back then. You just made these GET or POST requests,
Yeah.
and that was pretty much it. Nothing official like we have these days with REST. Long story short, we built this whole entire very front end centric, and this was IE3, by the way.
Oh wow.
So there's IE3 had a lot of JavaScript bugs, I remember. But that was kind of my epiphany, I think, for like, holy crap, this stuff is going to do amazing things, because we weren't just doing, this was classic ASP, by the way,
Sure. Yeah.
days, late 90s. And we weren't just, calling the server every time we're reloading the page. They could actually go through it, and it would dynamically, refresh parts of the page, like we're used to that these days.
Yeah.
But I think that was my epiphany moment for, hey, I think we're onto something here,
Yeah.
because you just couldn't do that before. It was like you'd build a VB3 or VB4 app and have to install it on the desktop. Whereas with this approach, it was like, wow, I can get this out to everyone,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it was, I mean, also too, like just the the veracity of things coming out. Like I think the web is very guilty, like even today, like of oh, like things move so fast in the web. Like I always, like I have a joke in one of my talks where it's like I think by the time this talk begins and ends, like there'll be 4 new versions of Angular. Like that's like just a throwaway joke that I have, right? And like I think about this a lot where it's like, and I love to get because I kind of came a little bit later. Like I graduated in college in 2010. So like the web was already pretty established and but like I did stuff like MySpace pages and things like that. But I think my bigger question is like when you're in it, do you feel how quickly things move or are you just kind of just going along for the ride?
I would say up until maybe 3 years ago, you could feel changes because, again, we had things like we moved out of the COM world, for example.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to build COM components anymore. Then we moved to RESTful APIs and things like that, like we were talking about. Well, then we had web services and WSDL and all that. And that was one of those that I always Ford was pretty quick at learning things like that, so I could just catch on. But I would say over the last maybe I don't know, maybe 4 years, now I feel like the pace has picked up substantially, um, to the point where I can't just, like you were saying, kind of, I don't know how you worded it, ride along or, whatever,
Yeah.
go with the flow, where I have to more actively dive in because there's just too many areas I need to be on top of for what I do at Microsoft, for example. And if I don't make an active effort to learn some of those things, there's just no way to, like, how am I going to recommend for my team or
Yeah.
for other teams what we're going to build for samples or whatever we're building if I don't even know the technology?
Yeah.
So I don't know. How do you feel? Do you feel it's also really picked up over the
Well,
last like 3, 4
I
years?
mean, I think the easiest way for you to determine how fast things are moving is by picking up a trend that fails. Like, for instance, like you'll probably relate to this. I had a project, like one of the first projects that I worked on. This will date me as to when this project took place. Like I worked in an insurance company. We had a lot of classic ASP pages, and like there was like we need to kind of rewrite some of these to be like a bit more Web 2.0, right? That wasn't the
Hmm.
phrase was used.
Hmm.
Like basically a lot of things that you were talking about. And like some architects of the company, they did a lot of extensive research on like what frameworks we wanted to use, and they landed on a framework called Dojo.
Oh yeah, I remember Dojo.
And
Yeah.
for a little bit of context, like Dojo was a spa like JavaScript framework similar to like an
Yeah.
Angular or whatever, right? But this was like early days. And we banged out like a couple of apps in Dojo, and then at a point in time, Dojo lost to Angular JS. And
Yep.
then you're faced with this conundrum. It's like, well, we built all these apps using this kind of framework that isn't going to really be around, like from a keeping up to date, making sure there's no security bugs, new docs, new features. So like we had a dilemma. It's like, do we need to rewrite all of this in Angular JS or whatever the framework is we chose, or just let it sit there until it just literally stops working? So like, I mean, so I guess my question to you is when something like that happens and you kind of make the wrong technology choice, like do you feel the pressure of okay, well now I kind of have to go back 6 months and look again at like what is around 6 months
What's
ago
the
and make it and
trend? And
yeah, and
yeah,
like and basically step in, use the analogy, like there's a fork in the road. You took the wrong fork, you gotta go all the way back to the fork and go back the other one, right? So the question that
yeah,
I have is like
yeah.
how much of that was kind of prevalent to you? It's like making a wrong decision, then having to backtrack, or making the right decision and trying to like ride the wave. Because I mean, in this JavaScript world, like there was this whole time where there was like people would literally get in arguments about like what framework was better. I mean, still to this day a little bit, but definitely like
Yeah.
10 years ago, it was substantially hard.
Oh, it
More,
was
yeah.
big arguments. Yeah. Oh, I remember.
S
Yeah. Well, first off, I think those experience, like you just described with Dojo, I totally remember that. Didn't that also have a licensing aspect to it, if I
Yeah,
remember right?
I don't remember
Um,
ex and I remember, like, we had, like, the founder of Dojo, like, come and do, like, a training session to us.
okay.
I can't remember
Okay.
where they like, how they started, but, like, this guy was, like, really good at his job. Like, if
Yeah.
his job was, like,
Yeah.
a technical trainer slash advocate sort of thing, very good at, convincing us Dojo was the right approach. But, yeah, like, they had a licensing thing, I think. They also I think that Angular being kind of run by like a larger community, like just
Yeah.
took them over. And then obviously like backed by Google, like it's gonna move way faster than any other framework would.
Yeah. Well, I first off, I think because I've had a few of those things as well. I could probably list at least five off the top of my head, actually, where they didn't like. Are we still using those today? Nope. Um, First off, I think those are like the best learning experiences because now, when, like you said, you have this fork in the road decision to make, and now we're in that fluffy world, right, where there's not necessarily a right answer that you know of anyway today. By having that past experience, it really helps with thinking. Instead of jumping to the next shiny object, now it's like, well, maybe we should think about this, or this before we jump down that fork in the road or whatever. So first off, yes, I've had many of those experiences. I went I never did Dojo. I did a little bit of Backbone, if you
Yeah,
remember that
yeah,
back in the day. But was really heavy jQuery for a
yeah.
while because it was the thing.
It's also still like
And
very valid. Like it still does
oh
like
yeah, it still works totally
yeah,
fine.
like what do you need it to
Absolutely.
do? Like I need to do that.
Yeah,
Like exactly.
yeah, absolutely. I'll have to admit, I kind of miss those days because back then the web, I don't know, it just felt like everything that came out was pretty new and
Mhm.
exciting. Now we're so accustomed to those kind of things that I think we're sort of to it. But anyway, getting back to your question, yeah, I mean, I've had several roads I've gone down. I think a good example I mentioned earlier would be web services.
Mhm.
Um, Before web services, for instance, and I never did this, but there was Corba, which was going to be the answer to everything cross-platform
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah, yeah.
And how many people are using Corba still today?
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
I never used it. I doubt you did either.
Well, I mean,
Um,
yeah, it's finish what you're saying. Go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, and then web services came out, and WSDL and SOAP and all fun stuff, and which totally made sense, at the time. Um, but it also had all these kind of weird, quirky things you had to know about, like WS security and WS this and WS this, and to secure your SOAP messages and all that fun stuff. And so, long story short, how many people are still using that today?
Yeah.
But did I learn a lot from that? Absolutely. Like now, when I think about REST, kind of followed that up. And now, when I work with RESTful services, you just have so much more insight into maybe we should have this or this or this. And even with some of the AI stuff, I think the lessons I've learned from those, we'll call it the good old days, kind of carry over. In fact, I don't know if you saw it, Isaac. I'd have to dig up the post, but there was a really good post about MCP security,
Mhm.
just as an example, to
Yeah.
throw out an AI thing recently. And the guy, and I'll have to admit, I really agreed with what he said. He kind of said, "Hey, why are we not applying the lessons learned over the last 40 years to this?" And so, anyway, to wrap up and go back to your original question, that's where I think those forks in the roads are super helpful. Because if you don't have that experience, how would you know,
Yeah.
which fork to consider?
Yeah, I mean, I have a whole rant about MCP. We can maybe have that at the end because I mean I don't see a lot of differences in like how people talk about MCP servers as to how people talk about SOAP or REST. Like I had this whole rant. It's like literally MCP is just REST with AI. Like, and I remember somebody's like, it's not that simple. I'm like, well, is it? Like, I mean, there's verbs, there's tools, there's all these things. You're just giving like new names to things. But anyway, we can talk about that in a bit. Um, I think also too, like, and maybe since you were like really, really deep in it at the time, like it feels like the web specifically was so much smaller 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that the expectations of the web was so much smaller. Like JavaScript has been around for a long, long time, but I think people didn't really realize like, hey, this thing that was written in 10 days or whatever the like whatever the urban legend is, like it's so flexible in that like you can literally do anything with it if you're okay with just banging your head against it as much as humanly possible. So like I
Yep.
like you bring up jQuery, right? Like one of the first big projects that I worked on was like a, you know, .NET framework, Windows or WinForms application or web forms application that had a jQuery
Yep.
front
Yep.
end, like, and
Oh
everything
yeah.
just
Did
worked,
tons of those.
right? Right? Like, yeah, like I think I had a colleague that was like, you know, at the time was like MVC and jQuery pays the bills or something like that, right? Because like there was a point in
Absolutely.
time where that bringing those experiences to customers, like end users, was like mind blowing, right? And I think at some point, and I don't know when it is, maybe you know, it's like there more expectations came out of the web. And I don't know if it's a social media site that brought it up or if it's, you know, but it just seems to me like at some point in time there was a larger like the web needs to be able to do more things. Maybe it's the advent of the iPhone, like because
I
then
was
like
that's
yeah,
exactly what I was
yeah,
going to say.
good.
I think mobile had a big impact. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where we run into this thing where okay, we've been building websites for 10 years now, 15 years, like really stable, like good looking websites. But it's like now these websites need to like run on a 1080p monitor that's like 20 inches and needs to run on a phone that's like what six by 3 or 6 by 4 or whatever, and it needs to look good and it needs to respond to touch and all these things. So you think it's literally just the advent of the phone put up a larger emphasis on building for the web?
I think that's one of the things I'd have to. That's a good question, actually. I definitely think it's one of the things because I still remember I used to have one of the even before Windows phones. I'm trying to remember what we called those. They
Blackberries,
literally had a little. What's that? It
Blackberries,
was like CE. No, it
Palm
was
Pilots.
from Microsoft actually. It was like a CE device, I think. Had a
Okay,
little stylus and everything. And you could run this little mini version of Windows on this
yeah,
phone.
yeah,
And I still remember I would play around with. They had some really early browsers. I don't know if it was IE or what it was, but they were horrible back then. And then all of a sudden, like you said, iPods came out, and then obviously iPhones came out, and then iPads. I think it changed how people interact with the web because it used to be you just had to be at your desktop,
yeah,
you know. Whereas when you could just be anywhere, and let's face it, how much time do you spend on your phone when you're not on a work
yeah,
thing
yeah.
versus on your desktop? And for me, I mean, I'm of the mode now where I'm trying to restrict how much I'm on the phone,
Sure,
you know,
sure.
just to have a life. And yeah, I think that was a big driving factor because, like you said, everything could be made with responsive CSS and all that fun stuff. Everything can be made to look good across all these devices. Plus you could deploy full on apps that are really just web apps
Mhm.
into app stores.
Yeah,
And yeah, so it's kind of, I think maybe that's earlier I mentioned that I feel like some of the shine or the excitement that I used to feel kind of went away. And I think maybe that's why it's just because it's everywhere.
yeah.
Um, you
I
know,
think too, like one thing that's pretty fascinating is like not just like the frameworks that have come out in the web. Like, I mean, I made the joke about Angular, but like most people that are kind of, I guess you would categorize them as front end developers, even though I hate that phrase, like they have to be proficient in like 5 or 6 of these different JavaScript frameworks. right? Not to mention like
Yeah.
knowing the two or three like majors like CSS frameworks, and then knowing like what the newest specs of HTML are, and now they're worried about WASM, and like and on top of that, like the tooling is so weird to me. Like I remember Dreamweaver, right? Like,
Oh yeah, I
yeah,
use
like
Dreamweaver. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
and I just remember like the idea of like dragging and dropping like little web components, and then you look at the HTML and it's just awful, right? But it's
Well,
like it's one of those things where like from a tooling perspective, I think that it's also been substantially more complicated. It's gotten substantially more complicated because we used to do like everything like WYSIWYG. Like what you see, what
yeah.
you get was kind of like how all tools worked. Like if you built web forms or WinForms or Dreamweaver or what was the other one that Microsoft came, Cold Fusion? Like Cold Fusion too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like so
Yeah.
like all of
We
these
did a
like
little of that too.
yeah, like all these tools that are literally just dragging things around. And then I think there was a realization, it's like, oh no, like those things build horrible looking like actual code. So now the developers have to kind of do everything but from scratch. And I'm curious, and the reason why I did that whole little diatribe is like I'm curious, like from a trying to understand like the tools of building for the web. Because you've seen it all, right? Like how do you kind of balance like new tool comes out, I need to learn that tool and decide if that tool is going to help me be better or slow me down?
I'll have to admit, my whole frame of thinking has changed with some of the AI assistants.
Sure.
I'm less worried now about the tool and more focused on how can I use, like I use GitHub Copilot all the time. I
Yeah.
played with Claude Code. I played with the new Codex. I haven't tried, there's Cursor, there's Windsurf. I haven't
Yeah.
tried all those, but um, I guess I would answer that by saying if you're talking about like as of today, in fact, work that I will do as soon as we're done, I'm much more focused less on the tooling, I think, and more on can the assistant I'm going to use call into that tooling?
Sure.
And when I say tooling in this case, I mean like a CLI or an
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
MCP or whatever. Because let's just take CSS as an example. Yes, I can hack my way through CSS, but if you were to say, "Hey Dan, would you consider yourself like CSS expert? Like you could just whip it up
Yeah.
from scratch?"
Can you
And
write a
yeah,
somebody reaches out to you, hey, can you do a course on CSS or can you write a book on CSS? No.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, do I know the core concepts and could I do a lot from just memory? Yeah, but that's just, from years and years and years of doing it. But like some of the newer stuff, you mentioned some of the browser specs that keep changing, things like that. You can't keep up with all that. So,
Yeah.
like, I'll just take CSS as one example. That's where nowadays, from a tooling standpoint, I'm not so worried about CSS tools as I am. Can my, for instance, I use GitHub Copilot a lot.
Sure.
Can it actually help me do this? And so I think more of my thought and time these days is in how can I write, there's this new thing out now that, well, it's not really new, but new to more of the AI world called spec driven
Yeah.
development.
Yeah.
And how can I write my specs in such a way, which is, really a series of prompts and things, kind of this context engineering that we keep hearing about now. How can I write those in such a way that it could generate, for instance, that CSS I would need so that I don't have to worry about that stuff? However, I'm a clean freak when it comes to code. I hate messy code, and that's why it's funny you brought up like Dreamweaver, or I used to use I don't know if you remember, this might be before your time, but Visual InterDev
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
had
Or Microsoft
a
front
drag and
page,
drop
same sort of thing, right? Like,
front page.
yep.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. And I did kind of used to worry about the messiness that could be generated. For instance, back in the web forms days, you remember view state, I'm sure.
Yeah. Sure.
And if you didn't really get a handle on what your view state was, your page could really grow in size, which that kind of predates our mobile thing we were talking about. So probably not quite as big of a deal, but still you had to worry about it.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I'm much more worried about is my code maintainable? It's not so much that it's clean, is we got to do maintenance on this stuff,
Yeah.
you know? And so that's why all these AI coding assistants, and just going back to my CSS example, I am kind of a freak, I guess. I geek out a lot about what prompts can I do to, in essence, create an agent that is almost like a code reviewer, agent specific to CSS
Yeah,
or specific to TypeScript or Python or whatever I'm working on. So anyway, I don't know if that doesn't really answer your thing
it
about
does.
tools,
It does.
but that's kind of where more I pivoted. I use GitHub Copilot like every day. I'm,
Sure,
I'm not
sure.
going to lie,
Yeah.
but I use it truly as an assistant, not
Hmm.
as here's what we're going to ship because it said this is
Yeah,
what we
yeah,
need. It's like, no, I need to review it.
yeah.
So
And I think that a lot of that sort of marketing, it rightfully so, and I'm glad for it, is starting to die down. Like the replace a junior developer with an agent. Like there was a lot of talk about
I
that a
would
few
agree.
months ago. Um,
Yep.
but also like here's something for you. Like you're talking about like not worrying as much about the tool, but now you worry more about the model. Because as it's
Yep.
been well documented, like some models are much better than others. Like I'm working on a blog post right now where it takes some of the learnings that have been kind of discovered and like what models, like what sort of personality they have. Like Claude does it like this, or Llama does it like, or Llama does it like this, or GPT does it like this, right? It's like, okay, so what is the best tool, quote unquote, aka model, for the job,
Yeah, you're right.
right? So
Now
it's
it's like,
like,
what's the
are we
model? Yeah.
transitioning a little bit from like worrying about tool sprawl to now model sprawl, where like in order for you to be an effective, I guess you can call it, um, context developer, or like even prompt engineer, which I don't really like that phrase, but whatever. Like you need to understand, like, okay, like I'm going to use this model because this model is better for, like you mentioned, or maybe use an agent for generating CSS versus, oh, this prompt is much better for like Python code versus C# code or Java code or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
I guess my question to you is like, at least when I'm a developer and I'm looking at tools, it's easy for me to understand like if I'm gonna do well with a tool or not. With a model, on the other hand, it's just me throwing a prompt in there and look at the results. So my question
Yeah.
to you is like, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but is it better to have tool sprawl or model sprawl?
I think that's a good question. And the thing is with AI, I think right now, and the
Yeah,
reason I say that is because, we've always had our CLI tools and all that, and those aren't going to go away. But now, we talked about MCP a little bit. You can absolutely have, you can totally pollute the context window with just, you have like 250 MCP tools,
yeah,
and now and it's supposed to be smart enough to pick the right one.
yep,
Like you have to be thoughtful about that. Um, and then, like you said, I've been experimenting just to go back to your model sprawl. In Azure AI Foundry, we have it's called Model Router,
hmm,
and it's kind of a smarter way. Like if let's say I had I don't know, GPT 4.0, GPT 5 Mini, Llama, whatever behind the scenes. I can sort of register, and I don't know that it supports all those, by the way. It has a
sure,
list of what it
sure,
supports, but it's basically a router where it analyzes the prompt coming in and determines what's the best model to kind of hit.
yeah,
And I think that's where we're probably going to
yeah,
go in the near future here, because like you said, like I love Claude Sonnet as an example. When I use GitHub Copilot, it's been kind of my go-to for a while. I've been experimenting with Codex though, because they have that new Codex
yep,
model from OpenAI. And I think keeping up on, you made the comment earlier, like, is this one good at Python, or is this other one better at Python? Like, it's really hard to know which is better. So I kind of feel like we're getting to that point where, yeah, we always used to say right tool for the right job. Well, you need to have some kind of a routing
yeah,
mechanism to pick the right tool. And when
yeah,
I say tool in this case, like you said, I mean LLM.
yeah.
Um, I think that's where we're going to go. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah,
I mean, it's pretty fascinating. Like, and I'm not trying to be like whole like don't trust the AIs, but it's like, you know, first off, we're putting a lot of trust in these LLMs to generate us code that we can then review it to figure out if it's going to solve our problem or not. But now we're even talking about, okay, now we need to put trust in a system that is determining based on our prompt and the context we provided, what is the best model for the job, and what actually builds that thought is probably another model, right? Like I
Yeah.
remember when
Yeah.
GitHub models first came out, and they had like a GitHub model GitHub extension. Man, there's too many like things in this phrase. But basically, like you're in a Copilot, GitHub Copilot prompt, and you can say like app model, what is the best model for this particular problem I'm trying to solve, and then it would kind of give you like an educated, I guess, recommendation, quote unquote, of like what model would be good for the particular task you're trying to think. And my thought process is like, okay, like that's a model that's trained on the definition of all the models and whatever, whatever, whatever. And in my brain, when I first saw that, I was like, okay, I'm putting a lot of trust in AI to tell me what the best AI to use is, which is very
Yeah.
challenging for me
It's
sometimes,
very
right?
meta.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. It's like it is the definition of meta, right? So I
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I mean, as we go further down this path, like I think the fear is for a lot of developers, right, wrong, or indifferent, is what code are we actually going to write? Because if we're at like again, I don't believe developers are going to lose jobs. I really don't think that to like the large extent. Like yes, there's going to be some optimizations that take place, but is the new developer just the person who can write like the best prompt with the right MCPs installed and then be able to read the code to understand what it's doing and then maybe give the model direction as to what needs to change and then your entire job is basically just interacting with a chat interface instead of actually typing in keystrokes?
I think that might be a reality at some point. I really do. And first off, let's go back to the meta comment. And of course, we don't mean the company here; we mean the
Sure, sure.
concept.
Yeah.
It's just even meta about that because they make LLMs.
Yep.
But anyway, uh, I do worry exactly what you just said. Like you're putting a lot of faith into something that you have no idea behind the scenes what it was trained on, and is it always going to give the best recommendation? What are the edge cases?
Mhm.
Things like that. We'll see how that plays out because that's still, I would argue, early days on that aspect. But getting back to the whole, what's a developer going to do? First off, I was having a conversation with there's someone I know just graduated from college, lives in the area in Arizona by me. I know his dad. My wife, he's our accountant, so we know that his
Sure,
son,
sure.
and he did computer science, and he's kind of just been asking like, what should I focus on? Because obviously he's in the junior, developer role. And my advice is you still need to be good at programming. Like these people that are saying, and I'm with you, that it's just going to replace everyone. And I don't know if I've, how many times I've heard that over my career. Is it
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
adjust things like you said? Yeah, I think it will there's going to be adjustments. There always are. But my advice was you need to be good at your craft still,
Mhm.
because like you just said, you're putting a lot of faith into these AI assistants, for example, that they're going to generate the right code. And just because it works doesn't mean that down the road it was a good piece of code that's maintainable, and security enhancements you got to think through and all that. So my advice was you still need to be absolutely great at your craft while also knowing how you can leverage these AI tools. Like if I were to interview someone that we were hiring for my team as an example, I'm absolutely going to be diving into the programming aspects that we need, right? And because I still expect you know that. So if they came in and they only know the AI tools, sorry, I'm probably not going to hire you.
Sure.
Be real honest. But if they come in and I can tell they're really good at the programming aspect and they can use these AI assistants effectively and know how to prompt and all that, that like puts you a leg up, I think. And
Yeah.
so anyway, I think we're kind of to that point where is it going to get where you're just interacting with like an agent's dashboard? I think to
Yeah.
some extent we might. Um, I was playing around with Codex last week actually because you can do it on your phone,
Mhm.
and I also use GitHub Coding Agent a lot. In fact, we have an internal project I'm working on now that's going to leverage GitHub Coding Agent to
Sure.
update a ton of repos. And so you could just fire off these issues, prompts,
Yeah.
and it just magically does the work for you. and then you have to, of course, review the PR.
Yeah.
But that's where knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at comes into play. Because who's going to review those PRs?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if like you said, we have this like agent farm and all you're doing is interacting with a prompt interface, like somebody's still got to review the PRs.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I've used the analogy a few times where it's like, to use like an outdated kind of legacy technology like the newspaper business. I mean, if you think about a newspaper business, there's lots of people that are writing articles, right? And then there's one individual or a group of individuals that are kind of copywriters or they're editors. And I say like the developer that we kind of think of is turning into, instead of an articleist, they're turning into an editor. And their responsibility is to kind of review, make subtle changes, give recommendation, whatever, right? Um, and I mean, if anybody's actually like, let's be real, if anybody's actually used these tools in practice, like sometimes it's very painful. Like,
oh yeah, you can go off the rails.
I'm not trying to knock any of them, but like I'll say, hey, do a little thing, and it creates a bunch of code. It tries to rewrite a bunch of, like, especially like agent mode sort of things. It tries to rewrite a bunch of code. It'll look at refactoring opportunities, and then like it won't build. And then I'll say, oh, it looks like you have a build failure, and then it'll start looping through and trying to fix it. And then you get into these situations where you're watching this thing just try to fix its own mess. And I'm seeing it less and less with like I guess the IDE based tools, and I'm seeing them still a lot with like the browser based tools. Like I'm not going to name some of them, but there's lots of browser based like, hey, build me an app, and
Yep.
basically it creates a React app for you
Same
with
experience for me.
yeah, yeah, right.
Yep.
So where it's like and with those tools you're paying like basically by like the like how you pay for them is a bit different than how you pay for like Claude or GitHub or whatever, GitHub Copilot. So like I've had a couple of situations where I've said, "Hey, build me like a e-commerce web store that's for like computer parts." And I can't even get the app like a 1.0 MVP with the tokens or whatever that it gives me. So I'm like, okay,
Right.
this tool doesn't work because I can't even get what I want unless I pay them $40 a month or whatever it is. So I guess the question that I have, it's like, you know, in this world now where we're kind of responsible for the generated output and we need to be knowledgeable about that. Like, at what point in time do we as a developer step in and say, look, you're failing, let me help this for you. It's like similar to like, I mean, you've had this a million times in your career. Like you give a task to a junior developer, and at a particular point in time, like it's past the experience of that junior developer. So you have to step in and mentor or just take on the work or whatever. But with these tools, because the expectation and the response is almost immediate, like when do you step in?
I step in after every iteration because, like you said, I use agent mode in GitHub Copilot, it's amazing as long as you keep it on the rails.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of that is, a good example I heard the other day was some developers apparently expect that you could say, I would like to add a photo viewing feature to this app. And like, that's the
Yeah,
prompt.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, think of how many photo sharing or photo viewing features there are across apps out there in the world right
Yeah,
now. Which one should the LLM pick?
yeah,
I mean, it's like, come on, that'd be like me and you, Isaac. I say, hey, Isaac, if you're, I used to run a contracting company for like 20 years before I came to Microsoft. That'd be like me hiring you and going, yeah, just build a photo viewing app.
yeah.
That's all I tell
Oh,
you,
for sure. I think also
you know?
too, like there is I mean, I think that there is some elegance. I mean, to go back to the problem solving or the curiosity things we were talking about at the beginning, there is something really important about how good you are at building a prompt and how well you like understand how this process actually works. Like for what it's worth, like when ChatGPT first came out, like that went like I think it was like over the Christmas holiday or like right before Christmas or something. So I was with a bunch of family and I was like showing like, oh, look at this cool thing. Like I can say, give me a taco recipe and it'll give you a taco recipe. Or I could say, you know, give me the population of all like basically like sophisticated Google search sort of things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my wife's uncle saw that. He runs a recruiting business. He immediately was like, interesting. And then he very quickly like turned his entire recruiting business into basically like a a chat GPT power recruiting business where he built
Oh,
custom
smart
GPTs and
guy.
all these things. And like, and what he told me as he was going through the process, he's like, You're shocked. Like, you are shocked when you realize, like, adding one or two words or removing one or two words from a prompt, like how different the results are, which I think is
Yeah.
very interesting because, to kind of circle back to what we were saying about like learning and being curious, like you have to be able to know what to put into the prompt or else you're not going to get your results ever. And like I was reading this article, and I know I'm talking a lot, but I have a point at the end of this. I was reading an article about like how much money is wasted by people like saying thank you or people saying like please in
With those
prompts.
tokens, yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this because a lot of the a lot of the problem that I see is that there's just no real understanding of what these things actually do. So from again, the reason why I asked do all of that is from your perspective, like how much value is it for everybody in the chain to understand what LLMs do versus what they don't do?
I think if you're going to be using them effectively, you need to at least understand, the probability aspect as an example, of how that works and how the embeddings, find similarities and all that fun stuff. Because if you don't know the basics of that, I had a good conversation. My wife, she's not really a technologist per se, but she's like super smart, way, way smarter than me. And I'm not saying that just because we're recording this.
Sure.
She's very smart. And we were having, and she reads up on AI stuff. And we were having a conversation. She's like, people are saying this, but as I understand it, and she starts to go into some of the like, semantic features. And I'm like, no, you're totally, right. It's probability based. So anyway, to get back to your question, I think if you don't understand that, if you don't give it the proper context, it's going to be really hard for it, probability wise, to come up with the output that you are expecting. And the way I liken it is earlier, and I think, like my consulting business back in the day, this worked in my favor a lot because whether it was talking to, the stakeholder of the company or one of the consultants working on it for me, you had to provide a lot of
Yeah.
context, and ask a lot of questions. And I do that all the time, by the way, with like, GitHub Copilot as an example. I'll be like, I don't want you touching any of the code. Might start it with that, something like that. I would like you to research this in the code base and give me the top 5 reasons why I should do this over this.
Sure.
Um, because now it has that understanding. And then when it comes with its recommendation, if I like it, I'll give it some more context, of what I want to do. And my prompts are pretty long, by the way.
Sure.
I won't say every one of them, but I type out a fair amount, or I'll even use the voice feature sometimes, which is
Yeah.
kind of cool if you haven't tried it. Um, and I would say, I don't know, let's say 8 times out of 10, I'm amazed. Like, holy crap, you nailed it.
Yeah.
And then there's the times like you mentioned where it goes off the rails. And then, that's why it's so important. I'm really picky about, I know some people use what do you call them? Work trees in
Yeah.
Git. I just tend to use the Git history quite a bit. And I'm just really careful to do iteration at a time,
Yeah.
review it, then move on. Because I don't know if you've done this, Isaac. I'm sure you have. Everyone has, I think, where you're like on a roll. You're doing this prompt, perfect. Doing this prompt, perfect. And you're into it like 10 prompts. Everything's perfect. And then you realize that 2 prompts back, there was this major bug.
Yeah.
And now it's like really hard to roll that
Unravel it.
back because you
Yeah.
can't just undo your Git, without losing everything. I sadly have done that a few times now where I walked downstairs one day and my wife's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I just lost like 10 hours
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
coding and she's like, "Why?" And I said, "Because I was an idiot."
Yeah.
Um, and I kept trusting. So anyway, that was a long-winded answer, but
Yeah, no, I mean,
yeah.
I've have similar experience, and I think a lot of people have that have like actually tried to unravel some of these things. And I think, you know, it's one thing too that I'm struggling with all of this is like the breakneck speed and like in the expectation that everybody's following along. Like, multiple models are getting updated or coming out every week or every 2 weeks, right? Maybe not from the big players, but like from the smaller players, there's new models coming out all the time. And on top of that, like there's new concepts. Like we went from generative AI to RAG to agents to MCP, like all in the span of like a year, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Totally.
now we're at this point where you have all of these different concepts, and at least I'm trying to connect them to, okay, if I was a developer 5 years ago, what is this? And that's why I made that joke about MCPs basically being REST, because that's how I see them, is like, oh, I have an external thing that I need to call. Okay, it's REST. All right, it's a web service, it's REST. So is that how kind of how you think about things too? Like you try to like do some rational like comparison to something that you've done in the past with something that's currently going on right now, knowing that these tools are substantially different, but at the end they're all the same.
Absolutely. Um, I'm a real, I think a lot of us are, not everyone, but a lot of us are really visual. And so in my mind, if I already have a hook to something I already know, that I'm like, and by the way, I'll use Microsoft Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever for this all the time. I'll be like, give me a short story that explains this concept in real world, easy to understand terms. I do that all the time.
Yeah.
I've even used it to generate like comic strips. I've tweeted a few of these to understand, like, I want to understand embeddings for someone who would have no idea about this technology, and or parameters, for example. And it came up with, like, just to give you a quick example, it came up with you've done a lot with audio stuff, a mixing board.
Yeah.
And, on a recording studio, which in a former life, I used to spend lots of time in recording studios. And, there's just knobs and dials all over the place and sliders. And so it generated a parameter comparison to kind of a mixer console. And I was like, okay, that's genius. I never would have
Yeah.
thought of that,
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, absolutely. If I can tie a concept into something I've already done before, I think that's part of why I can pick up things pretty quick,
Sure.
because I do have a lot of prior experience,
Yeah.
for good or for bad. And once you can kind of make that hook into, okay, here's how we used to do it. They just tweaked it in this way, kind of like you said,
Right.
then yeah, I think that helps a ton. Now, I will say some of the things with LLMs, I can't say that I really had experience, like, I don't know, the transformer architecture as an example. And I'm not going to claim to even have mastered all that, because I
Sure.
have
Sure.
not.
Sure.
It's very complex mathematically. But I have taken the time to go in and try to find, like, what's a real world analogy. In fact, I even made a series of posts about, like, it kind of equates it to Legos.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a tie-in you can do with Legos, it turns out. So anyway, again, yes, I would answer that's massively helpful. And that's
Yeah.
where I think I feel bad for some of the people coming straight out of school, because, think about it. Like you said, you named all those things over the last just year,
Yeah.
that have kind of come out. And if you graduated, let's just say in the last 6 months to a year, all of a sudden you're in this kind of no man's land
Sure.
of, like, we didn't learn any of this
Yeah.
in school, and you don't have the real world experience yet. And I think that puts people in a really tough position.
Yeah. I think too, and this is what I kind of want to end on, because your background, for folks that don't know, like you spent a lot of time in the consulting space, but you've been a trainer for a long time too. Like
That too. Yep. Yep.
responsibility is like going in and like teaching people the new things and getting people excited about the new things. And so I'd like you to put your trainer hat on. It's like, you get called up by some huge company and it's like, hey, Dan, like, can you come and tell us like how to be a developer in 2025 and beyond? Like, how do you start that conversation?
Well, I'd probably go back. I mean, I'd love to say I have the answer there, but that's a really good question. That's like
Yeah.
the $1 million question these days. And I won't say that I have, like, the answer, but I would probably go back to, I mentioned this accountant. I've heard, his son's been asking some questions and
Yeah.
things like that. I would probably go back to that and say, first off, what technologies are your core technologies that let's just say it's for a team, of training a team, that you're going to be using, and how proficient do you feel you are in those technologies? Because I think you got to start there.
Sure.
to go in and say, oh, let's just use GitHub Copilot to solve the problem. Well, if the team doesn't have that foundation, that's probably a recipe for I mean, it might work in the short term, but in the long term, that's probably not the way to go, right? I mean, you've been doing this a long time, and I think you know where I'm going here. So I'd probably start with how proficient are we in the core technologies? If the answer is, oh, we're really good at, C# or TypeScript or Python or whatever we're using, we're really good at the cloud technologies, we're using Azure this or whatever. Then I think my pivot would probably be, okay, what's your goal then? And I think most teams have always felt like they don't have enough resources. They got to hit these deadlines, or they got to maintain an app. They got to bring an app, kind of like your dojo scenario. They got to bring an app back from the dead and sort of
Yeah.
resurrect it, if you will, into this new technology space. And that's where I really do think, GitHub Copilot or whatever you're using for your assistant can be like immensely helpful. But I would then, as part of this training, make sure that we tie that into, okay, if you're using this technology, how would you instruct the AI to help you specific with that
Yeah.
technology? So
Yeah.
for example, Context 7 is an MCP tool you might have used it for documentation.
Yep.
And there's a few of these. There's Microsoft Learn has an MCP server, actually. Those can actually be immensely helpful to get that context that you would not want to type out. Like, tell me about Azure Service Bus.
Yeah.
I don't want
Yeah.
to type all that. So instead, that's where I think using some of the tools would help. And so I think that's what I'd focus on is if you're already good at the core technologies and your goal is performance, bringing apps back to more modern, or you just want to make your team more modern, then I think be looking at how could we leverage these assistants in a way that fits in with our team. And obviously every team is different. So it's, again, that's like kind of a long-winded answer to basically, I'll wrap up by saying, I don't really have the answer for that.
Yeah.
I think we're all
No,
trying to figure that out
I,
right now.
and I think the reason why I ask is 'cause I'm generally curious as to like what your thought process is around some of these concepts because I think you laid out pretty perfectly. Like if you don't know the basics, if you don't know the foundation and you go straight to LLM, like you're going to run into problems, right? I think
Absolutely.
you'll put too much trust in the LLMs, you'll make assumptions based on your limited experience in what these things do. So I mean, I've always kind of been of the mindset, it's like, okay, if you're working on one particular layer of the technology stack, like pretty have a solid understanding of what's right underneath it, right? Like, I'm not saying like go all the way down to like how components and circuits work because that's hilarious. But like, if you're building like a web app, like how does the web actually work? Like
Yeah.
how does HTML get rendered? Like these things are important to know, right? Because at the end of the day, like when you run into an issue, because we all will run into an issue, you're not immediately like Googling like crazy trying to figure out, okay, why is this pixel like 5 to the left when all of my code looks like it should be in the place that it should be, right? So it's just one of those things where being educated enough at the core components of technology is essential for any part of technology, even this new, I guess, definition of what a developer is.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Yeah,
I think that without knowing those things you just kind of laid out, you're kind of at a disadvantage. And I think teams that resist what's coming because they think it's a fad or whatever, long term, I think are going to look back. It's kind of the fork in the road thing you were
yeah,
talking about. That's kind of where a lot of teams are at right now. I do think they're probably going to look back and go, oh, we should have went down the road where we did, at least to some extent,
yeah,
started leveraging these AI assistants because you've experienced that just phenomenal moment where you go, oh my gosh, I just did something over the weekend, by the way, on a
yeah,
personal thing, very complex. And I mean, I gave it a good prompt and it was multiple prompts, but it nailed it.
yeah,
And I was just like, you got to be kidding me.
yeah,
Um, and so anyway, long story short, to wrap up, I think we're at that fork in the road for a lot of teams because I worked with a lot of enterprises and, the bigger companies out there, they don't move that fast sometimes. And so it's a big step to jump into this world, especially not knowing what this world provides and what the pros and cons are. So I will say though, once you learn the core concepts, it's pretty rewarding, or it
Yeah.
can be.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And this conversation has been great. It's been nice to get to know a little bit about your background and kind of how you go about thinking about things because as somebody that I've been a follower of for a long time and seen you kind of move pretty gracefully between like these crazy things in tech. And it seems like, oh, Dan's like always there talking about like the latest thing and doesn't say the wrong thing, which um
Gracefully, I love it, Isaac. You're my
gracefully.
favorite guy on the planet right
I'm
now.
just my job is to make the guest sound as great as possible.
Oh, that's
It's
amazing.
been it's
You're
been
doing
really
good. Keep
great
going.
chat.
Keep going.
Of course, of course. It's been really great chatting with you. And for folks that might not be following Dan already, the best place you can find him is on Twitter or X. Dan Wahlin, so DanWahlin. There'll be some links in the show notes to some other places as well. Like I know you do a lot of blogging these days and stuff like that. Um,
LinkedIn. Yeah.
LinkedIn's a good place too. And before we sign off, like, do you have any parting words for anybody and thoughts about the conversation that we just had?
No, well, I do have some party words, but first I'd say it's been great talking with you. You make it amazingly simple to just have a good conversation, and
Thank you.
I think you brought up a lot of really good questions. No, I would say we're at a fun time in technology. I've never seen. I've been in technology a long time now, over
Sure.
25 years, sadly. I'm starting to feel it, by the way, like 25 years, but we're at that pivotal time, I think, where it's like you're going to get on the train and you're going to figure this out, or you're going to miss that train,
Yeah.
you know? And obviously, we've said that with many technologies over the years, and you can always catch up. But I do think we're just at this time that I've never seen it like this before in my whole career. Now is the time to be learning this if you're not already.
Yeah.
That'd be my final words, I guess.
No, that's great. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you for chatting with me for an hour and the people that are watching in live and the people that are listening to this in the future. So my name is Isaac Levin. This has been Coffee and Open Source. And for my friend Dan, thank you so much and have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.